What up? What up? Well, we got another additional one. I forgot that I needed to do this too. Little boldito. Congressional influences. We talked about some of these today in some of the classes. So, what influences how Congress or members of Congress act when they go into that chamber, then that institution? And there are several different factors that may have an influence on what piece of legislation that members of Congress propose, how members of Congress will vote on pieces of legislation. There's two general ideas here in regards to how a member of Congress will act when they get into Congress. One idea is that they will act based upon a delegate role. Now, they don't say, I'm going to be a delegate member of Congress. It's a concept where you look at members of Congress and how they act in regards to reacting to pieces of legislation or reacting to the executive branch. And you look at it and kind of determine whether or not they are taking a representational voting role, meaning they are truly believing that they should represent the the wants and the needs of their constituents. So when they go and vote on a piece of legislation, they do it as a representative of the people that they are or that elected them. So that is a delegate role where I am basically a member of Congress who has been given delegated powers by my voters to make decisions based upon what they would want. This is difficult to gauge. Obviously, members of Congress don't say, I'm voting based upon this. Now, sometimes they do. When there's debate on the full floor, you'll see, or I should say, probably many times, they will give their rationale on some of the more controversial pieces of legislation on why they're either opposing it or supporting it. And again, this varies by member of Congress. And some members of Congress take more of a trustee role, that they feel they're entrusted by their voters, their constituents, to make decisions. That if my constituents elect me, they have faith in my ability to make strong moral decisions. Sometimes they'll use those kind of terms based upon my own particular beliefs. I've been entrusted by my constituents. So that's often called attitudinal, meaning I'm going to vote or support pieces of legislation or oppose pieces of legislation based on my own personal attitude on whether it's good or bad. So those are two really. We're talking about concepts. We're not talking about you run and say I'm going to run as a trustee member of Congress. Um, Again, I don't know why AP gets enamored with these two concepts, but this has appeared on a free response question in the past. So you do need to know these. Another influence in Congress in regards to how members of Congress will vote are certainly the leadership in Congress. It may be that the Speaker of the House has a tremendous amount of control. Ideally, you would think this would be the case because they're elected by a majority um, of their party. But you would think that a member of Congress would probably follow the beliefs of the leader of their particular party. In the House, that would be the leader of the Republicans right now, is the Speaker of the House because they control the majority of the House of Representatives. And then when you talk about the Senate, or excuse me, when you talk about the minority leaders, that would be the minority leader of the House. We talked about leadership previously. Um, there's a few terms here, vocab terms. Um, so you do have groups, you have caucuses in Congress. So you have groups of like minded members of Congress who come together and advocate for whatever that similarity in policy is that they would support with others. So I've talked about, for example, the Freedom Caucus right now in the House with Republicans, which are Tea Party members. They have specific policy stances that they want to be enacted by Congress. So they're going to demand those things. You have the Women's Caucus. So you have women's issues, which are maybe unique public policy issues for women. So when you talk about Planned Parenthood and whether or not that will be funded. I'm sure that the Women's Caucus in both the House and the Senate probably have pretty strong beliefs on that. Doesn't mean every female member of Congress is going to support that. You have the Sportsmen's Caucus, which is individuals from districts or states where there is a lot of hunting. And those individuals are going to want probably very loose, unregulated gun legislation on the national level. And I could go on and on in regards to different groups who have specific beliefs. I don't know if it's the Hispanic caucus, I believe is what it's referred to. When you talk about a particular policy area they are very concerned about, regardless probably of with whether you're Democrat or Republican, that would be immigration. So when you start to bring about this discussion of immigration in Congress and what the level should be and whether or not I was just watching a news report this evening in regards to the president wanting illegal immigrants the ability to get jobs, which is, a contentious issue for some members of Congress. You also have what is called log rolling, which is the exchange of votes. You support my bill, I'll support your bill. We get the logs rolling. You roll my log, I roll your log in regards to pieces of legislation. So that is called log rolling. I think it goes back to the days where when you were a lumberjack, you would have the logs roll down the hill into the water to go to manufacturing. And I guess one log would help the other log go down the hill. I don't know. Try to wrap your head around that one. Gosh, I'm going to screw this up. It's been too long of a day. Reciprocity. You're going to reciprocate, meaning I'm going to help you out and you'll help me out. And there's a lot of that kind of behind the scenes maneuvering between either members of the same party or even trying to get members from the opposite party to come to your side. Obviously, I've talked extensively about how partisan Congress is right now. So you don't have a lot of that, happening between the parties, but you have it within the parties, certainly. Because again, a member of Congress from a district in Oklahoma who's a Republican probably has different policy objectives than a member of Congress from DuPage County who is a Republican. The unique issues that affect the citizens or constituents for that member from DuPage County, as opposed to that member from a district in Oklahoma, you're going to have some cooperation. So this idea that even though they're both Republicans, it doesn't mean they have the same, objectives in Congress. So there has to be some interaction in regards to supporting one another's pieces of legislation, the exchange of favors, etc. Congressional staff members can have a very influential role in regards to the development of public policy. They are the ones that probably have the most interaction with interest groups who are trying to influence how members of Congress are voting, with interactions with the executive branch and the different departments. So if I am a member of Congress who is on the Committee on Agriculture, my congressional staff members are probably having a lot of interaction with the Department of Agriculture on different pieces of legislation or the enactment of legislation in those bureaucratic agencies. Obviously, we know interest groups and political action committees have influence on members of Congress. How much? Well, it certainly depends on who the member of Congress is. If you look at someone like Ted Cruz, a Republican, who is very much against special interests and makes that something that he talks about frequently. When you go back up here to how members of Congress act, he is very much in the trustee role, meaning he really votes based upon his personal beliefs. And a lot of times those are going to align with his constituents' beliefs, but not always. And again, we looked at in the article today report cards. Mark Kirk getting an F from the NRA probably isn't going to help him with some, you know, really, really conservative Tea Party members in his state, the state of Illinois. But it doesn't necessarily at the same time mean that those voters are going to vote for the other party, for whoever the Democrat is. But they might not be too thrilled uh, about his grade. I previously talked about caucuses, so I can move past that. The president has a tremendous amount of party over his, or excuse me, tremendous amount of party. Yeah, he parties probably. Who knows? But the president has a tremendous amount of influence over members of his party. Um, Maybe not so much now, as the president only has a few more years, a year and a half left to go, but especially early in the presidency. Because you know what? If you don't vote necessarily according to how the president wants you to vote, there are ways to punish you. And one of the biggest ways to do that is he may support a challenger in your primary the next time. And if it's a popular president, say what you will, but Barack Obama is extremely popular with Democrats. And remember, in the primary stage, you're not facing off against Republicans, you're facing off against fellow Democrats. So the president can use a tremendous amount of his influence, especially with the media, to criticize members of Congress for not going his way. So every president is different. Um, there's been very little pushback from Democrats to what President Obama has wanted in regards to public policy. There has been some, but not much. Um, Campaign contributors, obviously, if you get a lot of campaign money from a particular contributor, they may have influence. That's possible. Again, it can't be, hey, I'll give you this money if you know, pass this piece of legislation or enact this piece of legislation. But there are unsaid, uh, you know, activities that go on between contributors and members of Congress. The media, you have to be careful with the media, but there are some members of Congress that could care less what the media says, which was illustrated at the debate last week with the Republicans, which was basically the liberal media is out to get us and they're trying to make us look like idiots, and trying to get us to attack each other. So the media does have this watchdog role. So a member of Congress may be worried about what is this? I don't need no support assist. Um, Members of Congress might be a little wary of the media attacking them for supporting or opposing a piece of legislation. So that may play a role. And then last but not least, iron triangles. We've talked about iron triangles and about these interactions between the three components, which is congressional committee, whatever the related federal agency is, and an interest group in which they are impacted by whatever piece of legislation is proposed and potentially enacted by the executive branch. So I use the example of environment. So you talk about a congressional committee that deals with environmental issues, the related federal agency, Environmental Protection Agency, and carrying out any laws that are passed, and different interest groups that might be opposed or in favor of the piece of legislation. So you have a tremendous amount of interaction between factions of people who are affected by the same common public policy issue. So iron triangles do play a role, especially with the members of Congress who tend to head congressional committees. So the more power you have in a committee, the more interaction you're going to have with the corresponding federal agency, and certainly probably the more interactions you're going to have with, uh, you know, high level leaders of interest groups. So that's influences. Peace.